1. The Disappearance and the Worrying Neighbor. 2 years ago, my girlfriend and I moved into a charming old house in a quiet suburb, hoping to start a new chapter in our lives. Our new house is located on a dead-end street surrounded by large fields. About 3 months after settling in, my girlfriend adopted an untrained 9-month-old dog without consulting me. The dog's incessant barking and mischievous behavior disrupted our peaceful life, but we still loved him. One evening after returning from work, I discovered that the dog had escaped. I panicked as I searched the neighborhood, asking locals if they had seen the dog. They pointed me toward the large field at the end of our street. Determined to find our dog, I headed to the farm surrounded by a tall, ominous fence. When I looked through the window, my heart sank. Inside were dozens of mannequins, all wearing underwear and covered in what looked like blood. I felt cold down my spine. Suddenly, a tanned man with wild eyes appeared from nowhere. He claimed he had seen our dog and insisted we follow him. His sinister smile and urgent voice were truly disturbing, but I felt I had no other choice. As we followed him deeper into the grounds, my anxiety increased. The further we went, the more isolated we became. I couldn't escape the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Just when I thought we would never find our way back, we had discovered our dog tied to a post. The man's attitude became even more disturbing when he handed over the dog. We thanked him and hurried home, our hearts pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sight of those mannequins and the man's strange smile haunted me, and I knew that we had narrowly escaped something sinister. Story 2. The Host from Hell. My partner and I were excited to escape city life for a while and stay at a picturesque log cabin we found online. The place was advertised as a cozy rural retreat, perfect for a romantic getaway. The host, an older man with a warm smile, welcomed us enthusiastically. Initially, everything seemed perfect. The cabin was charming, the surroundings were serene, and our host was full of interesting stories. However, things started to feel off after a few days. The host began making inappropriate comments, particularly towards my partner. He had a room full of old videotapes and frequently talked about how much he loved having guests, especially young couples. His eyes would linger on my partner a little too long, and his jokes had an uncomfortable edge to them. One afternoon, we were exploring the cabin and stumbled upon a room filled with mannequins dressed in various outfits. It was bizarre and unsettling. "What's with the mannequins?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, just a hobby of mine," the host replied with a strange smile. "I like to dress them up. Keeps me company." The unease grew when we discovered that the only bathroom's door didn't lock from the inside. At night, we heard strange noises and once caught the host listening behind the door during a midnight bathroom trip. He often brought up previous guests who had left suddenly, which began to sound more and more ominous. One evening, he insisted on taking us for a drive, promising to show us a beautiful spot. Reluctantly, we agreed, but my gut told me something was very wrong. As we drove, he took us further into the woods, away from any sign of civilization. My partner and I exchanged worried glances, silently agreeing that we needed to get out of this situation. "Actually, we just got a call about a family emergency," I said, trying to sound urgent. "We need to go back now." The host's demeanor shifted, his friendly facade giving way to a cold, menacing glare. "Are you sure? he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. "We're almost there." "Yes, we're sure. We need to get back immediately," I insisted. He seemed to see right through our lie, but turned the car around anyway. The drive back was tense and silent, the air thick with unspoken threats. As soon as we got back, we packed our bags in a frenzy. The host stood in the doorway, watching us with an unsettling intensity. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, a hint of menace in his voice. "Yes, thanks for everything," I replied, my heart pounding. We got into our car and drove away, his eyes burning into... Once we were safely away, I did some research and found an online forum filled with horror stories about him. Other couples had experienced similar or even worse encounters. We realized how lucky we were to have escaped when we did. The thought of what could have happened still sends chills down my spine. 3. The scary delivery. Working as a delivery driver in the countryside can be very peaceful, but it also comes with many scary experiences. One evening, I received an order for a remote farm famous for its long gravel driveways. When I arrived, the setting sun cast eerie shadows across the vast fields. The farmhouse and 2 large barns are the only structures in sight, surrounded by tall, swaying fields of wheat. I parked near a large cylindrical storage facility and saw the customer's truck, an old F-150. The man, a burly man with a stern face, was waiting inside the truck. I called him to ask how he wanted the delivery handled, and his deep voice instructed me to place the food in the back of the truck. Even though he paid by credit card, his attitude still worried me. As I loaded the food into his truck, he came out and muttered, "Let's go quickly," while cleverly revealing a double-barreled shotgun in the back of his truck. A wave of fear overwhelmed me. Frozen in place, I quickly unloaded all my ammo and backed away, avoiding eye contact. The man's threatening tone and the sight of the shotgun confused. This isn't the first time I've encountered a scary situation at work. Earlier in that shift, an older man had threatened me for getting his address wrong, but this incident seemed much scarier. The thought of having to return to that farm to deliver again. Months later, the same customer called to place an order again. I reluctantly delivered during the day, hoping for a less scary experience. What was surprising was that he apologized for his earlier behavior, but the memory of his threat still haunted me, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in imaginary jobs. Seems trivial. Story 4. The Cruel Farmer. My uncle, a man known for his cheerful personality and persistent jokes, once shared a story that shocked me. It was a side of him I had never seen before, a side filled with fear and terror. This story happened during his college years in a small town in the countryside. He had moved out of the dorms in his 3rd year, renting a house about 3 miles from town. One evening, after a late night of studying, he accepted a ride from an elderly farmer who claimed to know a shortcut home. As they drove, the farmer's route veered off the main road into an increasingly desolate area. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the night grew darker and colder. My uncle, initially trusting, began to feel uncomfortable. "Sir, I think my house is in the opposite direction," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The farmer glanced at him with a cold smile. "Don't worry, son. I've lived here for 50 years. I know a faster way," he replied, his voice eerily calm. The farther they drove, the more suspicious my uncle became. The once friendly atmosphere had turned sinister. The farmer's eyes, which had seemed kind, now gleamed with something unsettling. My uncle noticed the man's hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white under the dim dashboard light. Finally, they arrived at a dilapidated warehouse, isolated and far from any other houses. The farmer stopped the truck, and the atmosphere became tense. My uncle's instincts screamed danger. "I think I should just walk from here," he said, trying to sound casual as he reached for the door handle. Without warning, the farmer lunged at him, his face twisted with malicious intent. "You're not going anywhere, boy," he growled. My uncle fought back with all his strength, adrenaline surging through his veins. He managed to push the farmer off and scrambled out of the truck. He ran into the darkness, the chilling sound of the farmer's laughter echoing behind him. He sprinted through the fields, his breath coming in ragged gasps, not daring to look back. He finally reached a nearby house and pounded on the door, desperate for help. An elderly couple answered, their eyes widening in shock at the sight of him. "Please help me," my uncle gasped, barely able to speak. The couple took him in and called the police. He never shared the full details of what happened that night, but the horror in his eyes spoke volumes. The police investigated but found no trace of the farmer. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. From that day forward, my uncle always warned us to trust our instincts and be wary of strangers, no matter how friendly they seemed. His story was a chilling reminder that danger could lurk behind the kindest of faces, and sometimes a smile could hide the darkest of intentions. Story 5. Farm of Horrors. Marrying into a farming family seems like a dream come true. My wife and I moved to a small plot of land on her family's large farm in northern Iowa. Her family is warm and welcoming, but has one strict rule: never venture into the restricted areas of the farm. Whenever I asked about it, my wife would dismiss my curiosity, saying that it was where her father and uncles ran their meat distribution business. One night, curiosity prevailed. I woke up at 2:30 a.m., slid out of bed, and quietly left the house. I drove around the farm to avoid waking anyone. The restricted area was shrouded in darkness, except for a few floodlights illuminating the barn and cabins. I found a small opening under the fence and crawled through, my heart pounding. As I crept closer, the smell of death entered my nose. I peered through a crack in the wall and saw red-tinged machinery and metal tables covered with surgical instruments. A large door stood tall at the end. I knew I had stumbled upon something horrifying. I continued to explore, finding files filled with names and disturbing details, organs removed, bodies dismembered. Suddenly, I heard voices and footsteps approaching. I quickly hid behind a pile of crates, barely daring to breathe. When the voice disappeared, I took the opportunity to escape, ducking through the fence and running to my car. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. The farm, which seems like a peaceful paradise, is a front for something very dark. Back at the house, I couldn't get inside by myself. I took 3 cans of gasoline from the warehouse, ready to leave and expose the truth. I knew I was in grave danger, but I couldn't let this horror continue. The thought of all those victims haunted me, and I vowed to bring them justice, no matter the cost.